So, hi everyone. Today I thought I would chat a bit about my work with museums and in the art sector around applying Agile and some of the stories that I can share where I've worked with museum teams, art teams, um, in various different organizations, different types of businesses, to help them to apply Agile and use Agile during their own change and uncertainty, if you like. So museums is one I love talking about, and I often share some of these stories, and some of the feedback's been is more stories. So this is where I'm looking to share perhaps some of those stories, which I hope will inspire you to do them perhaps with your own teams. So I think probably one of so obviously project management is brilliant in museums and heritage type organizations. Generally we're running lots of different projects all at once, so Agile as a project management method is really great, just to help people get on track, help them to visualize what's going on, help them to collaborate and share that. And we can do that at a kind of project level. But one of the most powerful things I think I've done with so many teams now is looking at creating an Agile roadmap for them. And so this is where we get everybody in the room, lots of post-it notes, a really long bit of paper ideally. So usually I bring a roll of paper that we can roll out, and on that paper we're going to map our post-it notes, and what we do is we get everybody to map what they're up to over the next period of time. So sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 3 years, depends what we're looking at. So we might be, for example, looking at a new 3-year program, and how we're going to run that, how we're going to develop and evolve that. So what we'll have is a 3-year timeline, and then everybody will have their various like color coordinate those post-it notes. So it might be that exhibitions are blue and education is green, and you know, using different colors to show different types of activity that's going on within museum. Some of the stories I think I've got that are really great to share. I remember doing it with one museum, and we'd actually nearly completed the exercise. We had about a dozen of us. We were in a big room. We had tables laid out with all this roadmap and this pipeline, and we were actually stood reflecting and reviewing, and it was really great because it allowed so often I'll see that, you know, exhibitions and education will start having a conversation because they'll be marrying up. And so if we're looking at exhibitions and events connected to the exhibitions, and then we've got our kind of public visitors, but then we've also got things like our educational visitors, so school visits and things like that, and often these things are run slightly separately, and so this really helps to bring them together. But one particular moment I remember is in this particular museum is as we were stood discussing the roadmap, the building's caretaker, I would call them, caretaker or maintenance person, support person, came into the room to look for something or get something, and he was like, "Oh, sorry, didn't realise the room was being used today," and very cheery and very kind of nice, and got introduced. So I just asked him who he was. I do the maintenance around the building, it's really great, and so I just invited him to have a look at the roadmap. And he stood there and he pondered it for a couple of minutes, I would say, and then he kind of just went, "Oh, this is great." And I said, "Oh, why is it great?" And he said, "Oh, I find this really useful because, you know, I have to work out when I can get into certain areas of the building, when I can do certain maintenance, when I can get into the rooms and do some work, so painting or decorating or whatever it might be. And often it's really hard to know when things are free and when aren't. So now I can look at this and I can see." And so we had a great conversation. And actually after that, then we kind of said we ought to add a maintenance line to the roadmap. So we might, you know, that kind of lane of maintenance activities that are going on. So again, you know, the team, the wider team can know when these things are happening. So the roadmap is really great just for giving everybody a really big picture. And it's true, that kind of adage that people say, you know, it's not just in creating, it's not the final product is necessarily that's most valuable, I think, although the roadmap as a final product is very valuable to then keep and maintain. Often, you know, teams will leave it on the wall and it becomes a real time, you know, kind of picture of what's going on. But actually as a one-off activity, just to get everybody on the same page, get everybody on board, alignment, ensure that we're kind of all talking from the same song sheet as such, that we've got our priorities aligned, and we're you know, we're able to actually do that, and any blocks or barriers or issues that we might see or clashes, that we can see really quickly. And also if we want to do something extra, so say we wanted to squeeze in an extra exhibition for, you know, a local artist or something like that, that we could do that because we've got that flexibility to change and adjust, and we can look for those gaps and look for those opportunities where actually we could add to things and develop and continuously improve them. So I think roadmaps in museums are absolutely brilliant, really, really great. And also other kind of arts, culture, heritage type teams and organisations, funded programmes especially, those sort of things are really, really great to roadmap out and work on as a team. So yeah, roadmaps I think are one of my favourite things to do with museum teams. Minimum viable product, I think, is always a really nice one as well. I think people tend to kind of pick up on that, and so good story on that is like a minimum viable exhibition. So I've had conversations with numerous teams, but especially a team I worked out with in Doha, where it's really interesting because we talked about this idea of a minimum viable exhibition. So when we've got ideas for exhibitions, before we start making these huge curation plans and putting it together, is how can we test and validate this idea? How can we see if people do actually want to come and see these exhibitions, and if they work, and if they don't work, or we identify ways to improve them and do better. So once we start the exhibition, you know, somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, oh, I've got something amazing that you could have in your exhibition, that we're able to say, yeah, definitely bring it in. So we can think about this idea of a minimum viable exhibition where we can test out our ideas, and we can put on small exhibitions or tasters and things like that, just to see if we can test that appetite and test whether or not that's going to bring us some footfall, and potentially doing something different and alternative as well. So if somebody's got an idea that we're not quite sure about, that actually what we could do is we can run, you know, a minimum viable exhibition, test it out and try it out, and then make decisions based on that rather than our own kind of opinions, if you like. So actually let the museum answer the question, so to say. Other things, I think, taking an agile approach, reporting is quite big in arts and culture because we're so reliant on funding, and so you know, taking this agile approach to project management, but also managing our workflow, I think is really good, because when we've got to run reports and we've got to tick those boxes, so to say, if we can take an agile approach to that, then that really helps us to release things early, get it done, and make sure that it's done regularly. So often I think we find we've got like annual reporting. I worked with one team actually who did an annual report, and I think it was around about 2021 that we worked together, so a couple of years ago, and they were still signing off the 2019 report. So the 2020 and the 21 were, you know, the 2020 was in progress, the 2021 wasn't even in sight yet. So they were actually kind of 3 behind almost, where they were trying to finish off this report and couldn't get it done. So we talked about how we might look to take an agile approach to that reporting. So there was some things in that report that were absolute must-haves, essential things that we must include in that report. So we want to include those. So our must-haves and our should-haves, we want to make sure that those things are in the report. And then the coulds and the woulds, we have those as kind of optional things as well. We can think about our minimum viable report. So what's the 20% of this report that delivers the 80% of the value, and can we get that out quickly? There's going to be content that's readily available, and then there's going to be content that we've got to wait on. So if content is ready, then actually we potentially, if that's ready, signed off and good to go as such and not going to change, then we can actually release that. So we might actually release our report rather than one complete finished document as perhaps in 4 or 5 parts. So yes, the 5th part might be a couple of years down the line because we're still waiting for the data and the information and things like that to come in. But actually data that we were able to share back in 2019, we would have been able to share it then. So, you know, some of the challenges you might get with this is, oh, you know, it's better to have it all done and then completed and finished off. But unfortunately, these things almost become never done. And therefore, you know, receiving a report 3 years late, yes, it's tick the box, you know, okay, if we get audited, great, we've got that report. But we haven't been able to really gain any value from that report because it's so late, it's so far down the line. So I think it is a real kind of good thing that we can look at breaking things down further, and rather than, you know, our annual reporting is look at, you know, what can we release now. You know, we could have a digital version, and then when we are at 100%, then we release our glossy version of our report. But in the interim, you can go onto our website and you can see some of the report content, what's available and what's not. So I think, again, really good example of minimum viable reporting, and also taking this more iterative and agile approach to our projects and to our reporting and things like that, which really help us to, you know, unblock those blockers and get things out there, get stuff out there, deliver it, even though it's not done, so that others can find value in that and take value from that. So I think that's a really great one. I think coming back to project boards, I think those are really powerful. So getting a team together to create a project board, whatever the project might be, really good for getting that kind of all the ideas out of your head, getting that backlog, what's involved, what do we need to do to run this event, who do we need to get hold of, who's going to do what, and then be able to track progress of that, I think is really, really great. And again, a kind of higher level roadmap of, you know, if we're running a big event or a big exhibition, then we'll have a roadmap of that, and then we'll have our boards that give us those day-to-day what we're doing during the sprints. And that's really great for using something like Trello. It really helps to make it more kind of collaborative, because other people can sign into the software, they can see the boards, they can join in, move things around. And I particularly really like it for meetings as well. So where we have meetings, often, you know, getting those meetings started and finding that structure can be quite difficult. And so I think what's really interesting is when we can use that as a kind of visual. So when we start a meeting, it gives us a point to review. So we can look at the board, we can review the board, we can review what's been done, what we could have done better, what, you know, what went really well. We can also plan the next piece of work. We can see what's in block. We can discuss those things. So it gives us a talking point, really something that we can talk around. Finally, I think really, you know, it's giving teams the opportunity to really connect and collaborate together, which means that they build a better It's not just about growth and productivity, it's about well-being as well. It's about giving people channels to talk to each other, making sure that we're checking in, making sure that we've got things in sight and that things are progressing as we planned. Enable us, if we are team leaders, managers, to actually see what's going on, and be able to make sure that our teams have got the skills and the resources and the environment that they need to get the job done, and be able to trust them to get the job done, but at the same time still be able to check in on that board and see how things are progressing and if there's anything that we can do to help. So I could talk for ages about museums. There are more things popping in my head as I speak. So I'm going to pause that because I'd really like to know if you enjoy this, and if you thought they're good stories, then let me know and I'll share some more. So I hope you have a great weekend. I'm Belinda from Being Agile. If you'd like to talk more about Being Agile in your museum, then do get in touch. I do online training, online courses, coaching. And do have a nose around the YouTube channel, but I'd absolutely love to work with you to apply Agile within your team. So great, thanks for listening, and please do give it a like and a subscribe if you found it interesting. Thanks very much.